This is the amazing story of Alfred Langford, who looked after two boys during his time at the asylum thinking they were his sons. He was born in 1862 in Midsummer Norton, Somerset, to first cousins Robert and Betsy Langford. In 1891 his brother Farnham died from a hemorrhage to the brain after a boxing match in a field with friends. Alfred worked as a miner, a common occupation in the area. He was admitted to the Somerset and Bath Lunatic Asylum on April 28, 1906, suffering from congenital mental deficiency. On admittance, Alfred is described as well nourished and of a ruddy complexion, but it's noted that his head is hydrocephalic. His palate is broad and low with no teeth in upper jaw. He is of limited intelligence and imbecilic from birth. He says that he and his father argued over food, and his father struck him on the head and he lost a lot of blood, and bled like a pig, and that is why his father is in prison. But there is no evidence of a mark or scar. Alfred spent his time looking after two young patients in the ward, Charles Philpott and Thomas Reed, washing and feeding them, regarding them as his sons. He is weak-minded and simple, but cheerful and willing. July 1907. Amiable and easily managed. He would be helpless if left to himself. July 24, 1908. On being awakened this morning, he showed marked weakness, was helpless and lost in mind. April 1910. Now with a very limited understanding and speech, he recently struck another patient, Edward Davison, on the head with a brush and cut it open as he didn't like the way Davison was scrubbing the ward floor. April 1913. Congenital mental deficiency. He is feeble and simple-minded. February 1915. He is getting weaker and is now receiving close care and nursing. Alfred died on March 31, 1915 at 4:55 a.m. in the presence of night attendant A.J. Milne. You may also want to know about the two young boys. Thomas Reed was admitted at the age of 4. Reason for admittance: idiocy from birth, but he'd become unmanageable at home in Evercreech and put into the workhouse at Shepton Mallet. He died aged 15 from tuberculosis. Charles Philpott was from the Bath Union Workhouse and admitted with epilepsy at the age of 11, and he died aged 17 from organic brain disease. All three of them are buried in unmarked graves at the Mendip Hospital Cemetery. So rest in peace, Alfred, Charles and Thomas. You will be remembered. This woman was admitted to the lunatic asylum in 1889, and today I will tell you her story. Jane Hardick was born in Portsmouth in 1831 to Lasbury Hardick and Mary Hayward. The family had originated from Bath, Somerset, and had returned there by the time of the 1841 census. She married Frederick Deacon in 1854. She had a son Charles in 1851, and he was followed by Frederick in 1854, David in 1858, John in 1864, William in 1861, Francis in 1867, and Louisa in 1869. Sadly, Louisa and Francis both died in 1872. Her husband, who was a stonemason, passed away in 1882. She went into the Bath Union Workhouse, and in October 1889 she entered the Bath and Somerset Lunatic Asylum. The report said she was aged 58 and suffering from melancholia, caused possibly by excess alcohol and epilepsy. Her admission notes describe her as a demented epileptic with slow mental processes but giving no trouble. She works hard at needlework, is happy and does not speak unless spoken to. Her health was described as fair for her age. She continued to have fits during her time as a patient, and in 1909 she had a fall and injured her hip and became considerably enfeebled in mind and body. She was nursed and lies in a swing chair when not in bed. In June 1910 she was bedridden, sleeping most of the day on an airbed and described as quite helpless. On the 31st of August 1910, it is noted that Jane was much feebler, gradually becoming worse, and died at 2 a.m. Cause of death: epileptic decay. Died in the presence of Edith Anstey, night nurse. Jane was aged 79. This photo shows the letters sent to her son that were returned with the words "gone away" written across them. She was buried in an unmarked grave at the Mendip Hospital Cemetery. So rest in peace, Jane. You will be remembered. This woman was admitted to the Somerset and Bath Lunatic Asylum in 1915. Today, I will tell you her story. Anne Randall was born in 1860 in Trowbridge, Wiltshire. By 1871, the family were living in Bath, Somerset, where her father James was working as a tailor. On the 16th of April 1883, she married Samuel Basket, a butcher also from Bath. By the time of the 1901 census, Anne, or Maria as she was more commonly known, was now a widow. Living with her was her mother Susanna. Her mother died a year later in 1902. After this, her life seemed to go downhill. She was convicted for lunacy in 1903, and again in 1907. In 1909, she was charged with 7 cases of theft. She was sentenced to 8 months imprisonment for stealing jewellery, a locket, a bangle, a gold ring, a bracelet, a watch, a silver clasp and a loaf of bread. She spent time in the Bath Union workhouse and was admitted to the asylum on June 11, 1915, aged 56. She was described as 5 foot tall, 6 stone 12 pounds, and the reason for admittance melancholia. The report said she was an elderly woman with sallow skin. She is somewhat freckled on base, arms and legs, hair greyish black, tongue clear and moist, teeth fair and some absent, pulse 100, heart sounds poor, no active physical disease. Mentally, she is depressed and dull, worries because she can't do her work, and so can't take food. She thinks she is past all hope and has been a bad woman. June 12, 1915, somewhat sleepless at night, fed by a nurse with her diet. June 13, 1915, she refuses nourishment and says she must die as she has been a bad woman and is past saving. She is very depressed and takes no interest in anything. She is very resistant when attended to. June 15, 1915, continues depressed and imagines she has done wrong. She refuses food, says she cannot take any. June 18, 1915, melancholy, is dull, depressed and miserable, thinks she is past all hope and has been a very bad woman. She only speaks when addressed. Poor health. July 1st, 1915, depressed but taking food better, thinks she has done a great wrong. August 13th, 1915, depressed, morose and solitary, will hardly respond when addressed. January 16th, 1916, has an idea that her liver and kidneys are all decayed, as she feels so bad. She sits idly about, but is out in the fresh air daily. October 30th, 1916, she has become very feeble and appears to be failing. She is confined to bed, she is difficult with her food. Her mental condition continues as deluded, has a slight maniacal laugh. She lies chiefly on her right side. She makes no complaint and her breathing is quiet. Dullness heard on right side of chest. January 5th, 1917, she gradually sank and died today at 6:25 p.m. at the age of 57, in the presence of nurse Emily Buck. Cause of death, lobar pneumonia. She is buried in an unmarked grave in the Mendip Hospital Cemetery. So rest in peace, Maria, you will be remembered. This woman was admitted to the asylum in 1902. She was aged 60 and single, and suffering from mania. Today, I will tell you her story. Mary Amelia Tucker was born on April 3rd, 1842, in Musbury, Devon. She was the daughter of esteemed rector George Tucker and Amelia Wills. The family lived at the rectory on Church Hill, Musbury. Her parents died within 3 years of each other, her father in 1863 and her mother in 1866. In 1871, she was boarding with the Gibby family in Colliford Street, Collerton, Axminster. In 1881, she was boarding at Queen Street, Collerton. Her sister Fanny was also boarding there. By the turn of the century, the 1901 census found Mary living on her own means at 3 Somerset Place in Totnes, Devon. However, her mental state had taken a severe toll. On May 6, 1902, she was admitted as a private patient to Wells Asylum from Axminster Asylum. The report said, May 13, 1902, is deluded and has hallucinations of hearing. She says she can hear people speaking through telephones, and that they have told her that the people who tried to do away with her and poison her have done away with themselves. She takes her food and sleeps well. March 7, 1903, is dull and apathetic and somewhat dejected. Takes very little notice of her surroundings. Moderate health. September 19, 1903, she is reserved and constantly hears imaginary voices of her relatives by telephone. She is troubled by imaginary electric wires and messages. October 19, 1905, at present in bed with slight rise in temperature. Is a grateful old lady and does not now speak unless addressed. January 24, 1905, is solitary, seldom speaks unless addressed. Hallucinations of hearing still persist. September 19, 1905, amuses herself with fancy work. Quiet, hallucinations persist, gives no trouble. April 18, 1906, gathers all sorts of rubbish which she hoards in a bag. Works away knitting all day, in fair health and condition. July 19, 1907, morbidly happy. Works at needlework, solitary, amused at messages she gets through telephones. Seldom speaks. January 27th, 1908. Decorates herself with all sorts of rubbish. Is always knitting or doing needlework with odd pieces that she finds or is given. She is somewhat deaf. Hears voices which keep her amused. July 6, 1908. Fair health, quiet, always sits in the same seat. Does not interact much with others. Decorates herself with things she creates from pieces of gay bits of cloth. And she now wears a black hat with a net veil which conceals her face, but she seems very contented. October 6, 1909. She hears wonderful things in hallucinations. Is quiet, harmless and gives no trouble. Decorates herself and now is always making some new pattern in lace, patchwork or other fancy work. April 4th, 1910. In bed recovering from cardiac asthma and is grateful for any attention. She takes a light diet. June 1st, 1910. Again in bed. July 21st, 1910. Gradually becoming more infirm. Very anxious about herself. Sick note sent to friends. September 21st, 1910. Now very infirm. Wandering in speech. September 23rd, 1910. She died this evening at 11:35 p.m. Age 69. In the presence of night nurse A. Shipton. Cause of death, fatty degeneration of the heart. She is buried in the Mendip Hospital Cemetery in an unmarked grave. So rest in peace, Mary Ann. You will be remembered. This man was admitted to the asylum in 1898, and today I will tell you his story. Benjamin Whittock was born in 1833 in Midsummer Norton, Somerset, to William Whittock and Joanna Hobbs. His father was a coal miner, and he was one of 9 children born to the marriage. On the 8th of December 1855, he married Anne Simmons. Benjamin was following in his father's footsteps and was working as a miner. Over the next 20 years, they would have 7 children. By 1898, he was age 65 and still working as a coal miner. When he was admitted to the Wells Asylum on the 21st of March, the report said he is afraid to be left alone with his wife, as he has an uncontrollable desire to take her life. He asks to be taken to the Wells Asylum. It goes on to say he had a severe attack of influenza a year ago and has not been able to do any work since. During the last 3 months, he has been getting restless and subject to suicidal and homicidal impulses. When the sight of a knife or some such object impels him to injure himself or others. His son Henry Whittock was a patient here and discharged recovered. His father and one other member of his family were insane. No history of intemperance or vices. The patient states that at times when the trembling attacks come on, he is afraid to be left alone with his wife, and he has an uncontrollable desire to take her life. He pulls at his hair and scratches his head in a very distracted manner. He says he does not know what will become of him if we do not put him away. He asks to be taken to the Wells Asylum. I have seen him in these trembling attacks, and he makes all sorts of statements as to doing away with himself and others. His wife says she is afraid to be with him, and he has told the relieving officer much more than he has told me. State on admission. A bright-looking sandy-complexioned man, with fair hair and blue eyes. Body covered with miner's marks. Weight 10 stone 2 pounds. Mental state. Cheerfully showing a good memory and appreciation of his own position. Says he gets trembling fits when he gets very low, and cannot depend on himself. Does not express any regret at his present position. March 23rd. Had what is called a slight trembling fit this morning. The charge attendant tells me that he sat quiet and said he felt loss, but the trembling was subjective and had no motor counterpart. March 27th. Usually has about one of his trembling fits daily. April 13th. Temperature up, probably some pneumonia in right lung. Examination almost impossible because of the very thick hair on his chest. April 15. Took his breakfast sitting up and apparently not seriously distressed. But at 9:30 he became suddenly worse and died at 10 o'clock in the presence of Isaac Rigg, day attendant. Cause of death, pneumonia. Benjamin was not buried in the Mendip Hospital Cemetery. He was taken home for burial by his family, and he lies with his ancestors in the churchyard at Midsummer Norton. So rest in peace, Benjamin. You will be remembered.